unborn babies are fetuses. Oh, you never hear a pregnant woman talk about her fetus. Come listen to your little baby brother fetus, Johnny. I'm having a fetus shower. A fetus cake today. Abortionists are abortion providers, sometimes just healthcare providers. Abortion clinics are reproductive health clinics, or women's clinics. One abortion clinic worker told the New York Times that she thought abortion clinic was such an ugly phrase. She wanted it renamed a place of healing and care. Yeah, except for the innocent baby sleeping in its mother's womb, whom they're going to kill. Speaking of which, kill is another word we're not allowed to use in the case of abortion. You can kill a book proposal. You can kill an ABC docudrama that doesn't reflect well on Bill Clinton. You can kill crabgrass. But one thing that cannot be killed, apparently, is a baby in the womb. That's terminate a pregnancy. Abortion itself is called everything under the sun except abortion. It's a procedure, a choice, a termination of a pregnancy. A reproductive health procedure. What other precious constitutional right are we not allowed to call by its name? It would be like gun rights supporters refuse to use the word gun. Don't say that, it's such an ugly word. The New York Times unrelentingly insists on calling partial birth abortion what its opponents refer to as partial birth abortion. What would supporters call it? If it were an obsession with accuracy that drove the media's locutions on this, what they would say is pulling all of a live baby feet first from the womb, puncturing the skull, and suctioning the brains out. Partial birth abortion is the euphemism. Needless to say, if the media won't call abortion abortion, they will never ever show pictures of this precious constitutional right being exercised. We're prudes for objecting to Janet Jackson's naked breasts at the Super Bowl halftime show. But if you want to see fascistic censorship, try showing a picture of an aborted fetus. What other constitutional right is hidden like this? And why aren't the places where this right is exercised named after the heroes of the movement? How about the Teddy Kennedy abortion clinic? Schumer abortion mill. This is a constitutional right that even the proponents of the right don't want their names associated with. This is why what Bush does in the war on terrorism may not compare to what he does on the war to be able to vote and live in a democracy again. We've been waiting 3 decades just to vote, not to win, when Roe was overruled. This is Dunkirk, not D-Day for right-to-lifers. We're not like liberals. We don't sit around waiting for the Supreme Court to hand us everything we want and then prohibit anyone from complaining. But we're not allowed to vote. The only way that will happen is if Bush puts maybe a few more Clarence Thomases and a few fewer David Hackett Coulters on the Supreme Court. If Bush does get another nomination to the Supreme Court, it will be World War III for liberals. They won't go to war against Islamic fascism, but for abortion, they're there. I don't even know why liberals are so terrified of Republican nominees to the Supreme Court. 7 of the current 9 justices are Republican appointees, and that's worked out great. Our judges go bad, and theirs never do. Ours go bad apparently because it takes an obsessive devotion to the Constitution to read it before issuing opinions. Judges are essentially government bureaucrats, and the natural instinct of all government bureaucrats is to continually arrogate more and more power to themselves. Having literally gotten away with murder in the case of Roe, the Supreme Court is issuing crazier and crazier opinions. They're starting to read like newsletters from NAMBLA. This past term, the Supreme Court announced that apparently we've signed a treaty with Al-Qaeda. something the American people would not have agreed to, neither House of Congress would have agreed to, no president would have agreed to, not even Jimmy Carter. But yeah, but now we all have to act like we signed a treaty with Al-Qaeda. In the past few years, the Supreme Court has proclaimed a right to sodomy, not in the Constitution, a right to partial birth abortion, not in the Constitution, a right not to have to gaze upon the Ten Commandments in an Alabama courthouse, not in the Constitution, a ban on voluntary student prayers at high school football games, not in the Constitution. You may like or dislike any of these rulings, especially if you're Al-Qaeda. But as suddenly alluded to, they're not in the Constitution. These bizarre rulings illustrate the notion of the Constitution as a living document, one that rejects timeless principles in order to better reflect this week's episode of The West Wing. The reason Democrats are so obsessed with the membership on the Supreme Court is that they can't get Americans to vote for their crazy ideas. Look at what happened to gay marriage. The Massachusetts Constitution, written in 1780 by John Adams, the most Christian of the founding fathers, and discovered a right to gay marriage. No one had ever noticed before. Naturally, the court was billed as striking a blow for progress. We were reading polls. You don't remember this. It's gone down the memory hole. But unfortunately for liberals, we now have LexisNexis. And polls at the time said Americans were warming to the idea of gay marriage, which would be sweeping the country, gay marriage, wave of the future, and that Americans were allowed to vote. Now there have been about 24 referenda, and no place where Americans have been allowed to vote has it passed. No, of course. It was the courts foisting gay marriage on America. I'd say they were shoving gay marriage down our throats, but in deference to my gay male fans, I will avoid that phrase. At first, the Democratic candidates were delighted to be able to talk about gay marriage. They wouldn't have to keep retailing their idiotic ideas about national security. But then they realized they'd have to talk about gay marriage. Some were so happy they seemed almost gay. At a town hall meeting in Mississippi during the campaign, this is one of the highlights of the gay marriage debate, it led to John Kerry, the man they wanted to be president, haranguing a black woman in Mississippi on the meaning of civil rights. A black woman at a town hall meeting in Mississippi, the woman stood up and made the simple point, I don't care what they say, there's no correlation between gay rights and civil rights in terms of what black Americans have gone through. Kerry responded by telling the woman about the Equal Protection Clause. You know, because a black woman in Mississippi needs to be reminded of the meaning of the Equal Protection Clause. The woman was not, as the New York Times put it, satisfied with Kerry's response. She said, my point is homosexuality is an idea. You've never heard a doctor say, Mr. and Mrs. John Doe, you have a bouncing baby homosexual. So first of all, I'd like this woman to be my speechwriter. Kerry replied by saying he was a Christian, an altar boy, honk, honk, honk. Number two, he had fought in Vietnam. He really did. I'm not making that up. I don't know. He met blacks in Vietnam or he met gays in Vietnam, something. And finally, again, he said, American citizens deserve the protection of the Equal Protection Clause. So there we have it. We've come full circle. We have the Democrats lecturing a black woman in Mississippi on the meaning of the Civil Rights Clause, Equal Protection Clause. I do have a rule on the whole gay marriage debate. I think if you're the one trying to overturn a 3,000-year institution, I'm thinking the burden should be on you to make the argument.